and welcome to Round Robin. I'm your host, Robin McCormick with the City of Hampton. And today we are going to talk about parenting, but from a little bit different perspective, how men need to be involved in parenting their young girls. My guests are Healthy Families consultant, Alvean Lyons. Welcome back.
Good morning.
And today you've brought with you the Reverend Kevin Swann. Welcome.
Hi, how are you?
I
Glad to be
did.
here.
I am excited about this topic because
too.
I once was a daughter. I didn't have girls, but I think we spend a lot of time talking about how fathers need to be involved with their sons and not enough time talking about fathers and their daughters.
Absolutely. And there's an enormous impact. But most times, as you mentioned, we don't even recognize that it is not just the same gender mothers and daughters that have a huge impact on whether or not you're raising strong young women. But the father factor is significant and shouldn't be underestimated. So we didn't think that it was fair to have a conversation about fathers and not include a father. So we brought one.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate that.
Usually we just talk about people in
Right.
so
Yeah,
you're
thank
lucky.
you. Yes, I'm glad to be representing the dads.
Yes, indeed.
Today, yeah.
Indeed.
So why are dads important? You've got firsthand knowledge.
I do. And let me say I have a 16-year-old daughter and I have a 13-year-old son, so I can appreciate both sides. And there's a sense of pride that you feel from father to son. But there's a different type of relationship with fathers and daughters. You know, daughters kind of touch that spot in your heart that, dads can't always get with their sons. And so having that experience raising my daughter, it's been a joy for me. She's touched me in places, as I said earlier. And what I notice now is, whether you're in the home, dad, or out of the home, you still can make a tremendous impact because young girls, when they look for boyfriends and they look for husbands, they really look for their fathers first and what they see at home or what they see growing up. So it's really, really important that the father have a critical place in the daughter's life.
So it sounds easy, right? Have a critical place in raising your child.
Indeed.
We all, I think, start out thinking that that's a good thing.
Of course.
But sometimes things get in the way.
Absolutely.
Dads have tended in the past to a lot of times work crazy long hours
Yes.
and to not be there, to not have a job where they can take time off for parent-teacher conferences or for dance recitals or basketball games, whatever it is harder because of cultural norms sometimes.
Absolutely.
For dads, even who live in the home with their kids, to be present as much as they would like to be. How do you navigate that?
Well, part of it is because most men think of love as providing. So for men, fathers think, okay, me working is showing you how I appreciate you. But for women, it's more of an emotional connection. So there has to be opportunities where the father can say, yes, I am working, but yet also I want to talk with you. I want to hear about your day. I want to understand. And you're right. I work long hours as well, but my daughter and I, we make a conscious effort every day. At some point, I still take her to school. So during the time that I take her to school, that's our conversation time so she can know that daddy is still interested in her world. So you have to find both. You do have to provide because security is important, but then you also have to find those connections emotionally.
And so you could do those at whatever works for your family, for your schedule. Car time always helped me because for some reason they're not looking at you, and
Right.
it makes it easier to tell you stop. They didn't really
They don't
plan
want to say on your
you.
face, right?
Yes.
And it's true. It's what we do with the time that we have. We live in a very crazy world at this point, and most of us can't afford to just have single working individuals in the house, as in
Right.
one person stays home and one person works, and that's enough to keep the household together. So the reality is that we have to get creative about how we're going to stay connected with our kids because the impact is huge. I work in programs with adult women now who I can watch the byproduct of the absenteeism of their fathers in their decisions currently. So these women, most of them are over the age of 25, and many of whom are single parents, many of whom have chosen men that are very similar, as Pastor Swann just acknowledged, very similar to the fathers that they had or didn't have, as in they are with men that are as absent as their fathers were during their lives. And as a byproduct, the poverty levels, which you could look at national statistics, poverty levels are higher for single parents. children with emotional issues higher in single parent households, women themselves as they grow up having issues with whether or not they make healthy connections, depression, anxiety, early sexual activity. The list is quite significant about what happens when you are not present. So even those small moments of connecting with your daughters, even if you're not present in the home on a consistent basis, makes a huge difference in them feeling like they're not alone in this world and they're not looking for a relationship to fill a hole that a father should have filled when they were younger.
Okay, so some of it is that one-on-one interaction.
Absolutely.
Or that interaction in the broader family group.
Yes.
But you also mentioned, let's get back to I'm going to use we since we as women tend to look for somebody like that father.
Indeed.
And if that father treated our mother a certain way, or his, maybe his second wife, whatever it is, it's that interaction between the grown-ups as well as the interaction between father and daughter.
Absolutely. Modeling matters.
It does matter. And it's not always the connection with the daughter, it's what they see growing up. And I make it a point, my wife and I have been married for 20 years, so we make it a point that our daughter sees us interacting in a positive way. I don't want my daughter to see me having a heated conversation with my wife or approaching my wife in a certain way that would appear to be threatening.
And certainly, I mean, that is something that we have seen, long-term trends have studied, that domestic abuse tends to perpetuate.
It's cyclical.
Both on the guy side and on the girl side.
It's
it becomes a
cyclical.
pattern.
Indeed.
It's what you see growing up.
Absolutely.
And it's comfortable. It's just the way life is.
And then dysfunction becomes the norm.
Right.
Indeed.
So now when I go out and look for someone, I'm used to that dysfunction, and that's usually who I'm going to be attracted to.
Yeah, and our daughters accept it
Right.
As
because they
normal.
think it's normal.
Because
Absolutely.
that's what
It's all
love
they've
looked
seen.
like to
Right.
them. Right, of course.
So my wife and I spend a great deal of time. We have dinner every night as a family. I know that sounds...
That is hard to do. It's super hard.
It's very difficult, and sometimes it's late hours when we have it. I know that's not always the healthy thing, but we make it a point to sit down as a family every night. And we want our children to see what a healthy relationship should look like. And I know that there are many dads who are not in the home, but you still can maintain a healthy relationship with mom to the extent that you can, even though you may have moved on.
Yeah, and we've talked about that a lot,
course.
that relationship between people who used to care about each other at
Right.
least long enough,
Right.
to become dysfunctional. And if they could at least maintain cordiality or friendship, or at least only focus on the things they agree on, which is the young
child.
people.
Yes,
Of
at the
course,
end of the
of
day,
course.
you have to still co-parent.
Right.
Because you have a child here, and regardless of the relationship dynamic, you still got to figure it out of how you're going to do it for the child. And yes, sometimes the child ends up in the middle, unfortunately, but that does make it more important for the father, if he's not in the home, to be more consistent with his daughter. And so if I'm not there, I'm not going to see you every day, then I need to make sure I'm honoring my word. If I say I'm going to see you on Friday,
Right.
I need to be there on Friday.
Right.
Yes.
If I'm going to see you on Sunday, I need to be there consistently. And that's what regains the trust, even though dad may not be physically present every day.
And we've talked many times about the importance of consistency. Every bit of the foundation of effective parenting is based on consistency. We can say all the things we want to say with kids, but if they know that we're not going to do what we say we're going to do, it breeds all kinds of disruption inside of a house. My ability to respect your word is a byproduct of the fact that, do I believe that you're actually going to make good on the word? Even the threat, for instance. If I say to you, if you don't do the following things, you're going to be grounded, but I never ground you, I'm wasting my breath. There's no reason for me to even say it. If I say that I love you, but all of my actions are not consistent with that love and me being able to trust your word, then that erodes the foundation of the relationship. And as a father, the importance of making sure that your daughters can trust your word, because a man is only as good as his word. So we want to make sure that you're choosing the kind of men that when they say that they're going to be there for you, they are there for you, but you saw that modeled in the way that your father treated you and the way that you watched your father treat your mother.
Hard.
Yeah.
Okay, well, now let me ask you a question. There are dads who aren't able to do that, or maybe don't live in the same state, or aren't around, or have a new family. Are there other people who can help fill in? And if so, how do you do that? Or dad just needs to figure it out and stay involved, no matter what, whether it's Skype. There's a lot more technology now than
Right.
there used to be to
Right.
keep people connected.
Yeah, we have people in our congregation. I have this conversation all the time. Blended families are very common today.
Indeed.
Right? And so with that, that does not excuse the biological father from their responsibilities. Even if the mother has moved on, even if the mother, say, is relocated and in another relationship, you're still the dad. And so there's still ways, as you mentioned, using technology, text messaging, FaceTime. There are many different ways now that you can still stay connected that you couldn't in our time when we were growing up. It makes it a lot easier. So really, it's more about the commitment level of the dad to say, you know what, I know you're not with me physically, but let me still make the effort to reach out to you on a consistent basis and keep this relationship going.
And you know what? We've said this before. Mom has to not get in the way of that.
Truly,
Right.
truly, because
Mom has to let go of
Oh, that
whatever
is so
resentments
true.
there were.
That's a whole nother
and
show.
facilitate it
Literally.
with the kids. Yeah, it is.
literally,
That's
it's so
another show.
true because you have to recognize the fact that just because he doesn't want to be with you does not mean that he doesn't want to be with his kids. So you should not be a barrier between him and having a healthy relationship with his kids. You've got to separate those two loves.
You've got to remember
They are
it's
not
better
the
for the
same.
daughter.
Absolutely.
In the long run, no matter
Absolutely.
what difficulty they may be going through at some point, because I think sometimes it can be so complicated.
And it is.
And if I
it
could
is.
speak to that for a moment, because there are dads out there that really do want to have a
Right.
good relationship with their children. And unfortunately, mom may step in the way sometimes to make that difficult. And that's really unfortunate because, as you said, at the end of the day, we have this child who did not ask to come here,
Right.
who's brought into this world that needs
We brought
Right.
the balance
world.
of
Together.
both,
Right.
right? To know what a healthy relationship looks like, and sometimes that does get lost, but later on, sometimes they're able to pick that back up. But you've lost the formative years.
So what are some tips for dads who maybe aren't terribly comfortable, especially, maybe they're great with a girl until that whole adolescent thing starts to happen,
Yeah.
and then she clams up suddenly, or it just becomes more difficult. What are some tips for getting through that part?
Well, I think communication and allowing your daughter to speak openly and freely. And I'll just give it. And sometimes,
Girls will do that.
Yeah,
They will
sometimes.
easier
Yeah,
than
yeah.
boys will
You can't-
generally. Right.
Getting boys to talk is hard.
but when they open up, you can't cringe. you have to let them speak. Like, I'll just give an example. So when my daughter started her cycle, she's very open now with me about it. And at first, I was like, I don't know if I want to hear this. But she's very comfortable. And so if we're going to talk about other things, then she has to feel comfortable talking to me about things that maybe I don't necessarily want to hear.
Right.
But if she feels like she can tell me, then that can open the door for other conversations. Like when we talk about boys.
I was going to
when
say.
we talk about sex.
Right.
Right.
And we
How do you react?
We're very open with it. I'm very open with it. We have lots of conversations about it. Again, we have dinner most nights, and that's one of the topics. Valentine was recent. We had a conversation. How do you all date in this generation? We can understand.
different.
It's very
Oh,
different.
very.
And a lot of what they do is social media driven. So now how do you find someone? How do you make sure that someone is right for you? We have those kinds of conversations. But if you're going to be open in that area, you have to allow them to be open in other areas.
If you want to maintain relationships, and you and I talk about it all the time, communication is essential to all of that. But we train the people in our lives how to communicate with us and whether or not it's safe to communicate with us. Our reaction teaches them how much they can and cannot do with us. So as Kevin mentioned, if I respond in a way that suggests that I can't handle it, then I'm training my child not to have these conversations with me. But if I respond in a way that says that even though Daddy may be uncomfortable
or not quite understand,
or not fully understand because I am a guy and you
Right.
are a girl.
I've never had that experience.
Right, I've never been a girl. So even if I'm uncomfortable with those things, I still love you so much that I'm willing to walk through my discomfort into a place of connection with us so that you know that I am a safe place to talk about whatever you need to talk about. And yes, I may be uncomfortable again, but I've shown you consistently that I don't get stuck in my discomfort. I am far more interested in being there for you than I am in maintaining my comfort zone. But we train our children and how they're going to communicate with us the same way we do that with partners. We talk about that too. If you flip out every time your partner tells you the truth, you're training your partner to lie.
Right.
and that
at
is
least
never the
withhold,
goal.
right.
Right, absolutely. And
Not a
omission
good
is a lie
thing.
in court, but
Yeah.
So
Okay.
yes, indeed, we want to make sure that we're creating the environments that allow our children to be really plugged in with us, and that has everything to do with how we react.
And if I could add to that, part of it also is understanding that maybe at 16, my daughter knows a whole lot more than what I knew at 16.
Right?
Yeah.
And so
they
sometimes we
do.
have this thought that, you should know what I know, but with access to the internet and other things, they are exposed to a whole lot more. And maybe now what they are experiencing at 16 is what we experienced at 18, 19, 20,
Right.
21.
Right.
So you do need to keep the lines open because a lot of things are coming at them much faster than it did when we were raised.
Oh my gosh, with all the different types of media. It was just a different generation. Our kids look at everything differently. They
Yes.
look at race, they look at gender, they look at relationships.
They do.
I mean,
Absolutely.
it really is a
Absolutely.
different world for them to navigate.
Indeed.
Responsibility. I mean, there's a whole lot that they are exposed to that we may not understand or
Fully,
may not,
right.
grasp. And we have to be ready to roll with whatever it is.
Indeed, indeed.
And that's why conversations are important because it helps us to understand how they are seeing the world. Now, to be honest, how we see the world is different than how our parents saw the world. So
Very-
all of this is
yeah.
generational. But in that, we have to be open enough to say, okay, that's not how I see it necessarily, but let me help you to navigate. And I know, Alvin, you speak a lot of times about how as kids get older, the conversations get
Absolutely.
different. Your role
Absolutely.
as a parent becomes different, and you have to make those adjustments as they get older.
You move from, what is it you say?
And we talked about it. You start as supervisor.
Right.
So you're really right on top of things, overseeing everything that's going on. Then you move to manager, where the child really has a foundation already and they're starting to do things on their own. But when you need to step in, you're still keeping an eye and you step in. But when your children hit a certain age, you become the consultant. It is by invitation only because they are now young adults and they have to have developed enough of a relationship with you through that continuum to now move from a place of needing you to a place of wanting you to be involved in the decisions that they're making. But if we haven't evolved, like Kevin was referencing, if we haven't evolved with them in that process, then we will find ourselves on the outside looking in to a life that matters more than anything in the world to us. We want to position ourselves to be actively involved in our kids' lives, but we have to grow with them in order for that to be possible.
Now, Kevin, is that harder for dads?
Yes.
Because there's this dad stereotype
Yes.
of, big bully dad who bullies the first guy that his daughter
Right.
brings in the house and who is the overprotective,
Yes.
that's like instinctive.
My daughter will always be daddy's little girl, and I don't care how old she becomes, right? But
You don't get to stand over her and pull the puppet strings anymore.
right, because she even says, "Dad, I don't need that kind of relationship anymore," and that's sometimes tough for dads to hear because you always want to be that one that can save her and make sure she doesn't bruise and doesn't hurt.
Her hero.
But at some point, you have to grow up, and you're going to have to enter into a world that maybe not kind, and you need to know how to handle yourself in a world that may not always be for you. And that takes an adjusting for fathers. And I admit it took me an adjustment period to get there, but
Do you have any tips?
pray.
There you go.
Pray.
There you go.
Pray. No, but again, there comes a time where, and I hate to say this, you have to sometimes allow your children to fail.
Right.
You have to give them permission. And I know sometimes we always want to jump in and protect
Yeah.
them from hurting, but if they're going to learn, sometimes you have to step back. And that's tough to do. And they're going to make mistakes. We made mistakes.
Indeed.
But you be there to support them after they get up. That's the most important thing.
All right. That sounds like a good ending point. So if you guys don't have anything to add, I think maybe we'll stop there.
Absolutely. We'll come back to the conversation in the future.
Thank you. Yeah, we need to talk about sons next, don't we?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you for watching. I hope you have thought about conversations with your daughter, if you are a father, and how that needs to grow and change over time. But the main thing is modeling, consistency, and communication. So stay involved. Thanks for watching.